The 2023 NHL season has been pretty bizarre so far. The New Jersey Devils are one of the top teams in the league, while the Florida Panthers sit outside of a playoff spot. The Seattle Kraken are comfortably in a playoff position, while the Oilers and the Flames are fighting for their lives in the wild card. The Buffalo Sabres have scored the most goals of any team this season. Players we expected to have really good seasons are really not, and some players have come out of nowhere with how good they've been playing. This season has been a really strange one, and for me, one of the most confusing things about this season are the LA Kings. Last season was a really good year for the LA Kings. They finished with a record of 44, 27, 11 for 99 points, which put them third in the Pacific Division, and they made their first playoff appearance since the 2018 season. And during the offseason, they were able to trade for Kevin Fiala. So going into the 2023 season, many expected the LA Kings to be a lock for the playoffs. And so far, after 32 games, the LA Kings are third in the Pacific with a record of 15, 11, and 5, which on paper shouldn't be that big of a surprise. They were a really good team last season, and they added Kevin Fiala on top of that. But by looking at how this team has played this season, the fact that they've been in a playoff spot for a majority of the season is really confusing. First of all, let's talk about the goaltending. The LA Kings have the worst save percentage in the entire league this season. In 20 games, Jonathan Quick has an abysmal .887 save percentage, and while that is objectively terrible, he isn't even the worst goalie on the team. In 10 games played, Cal Peterson has an even worse .868 save percentage. I guess it is worth noting that Phoenix Copley has a .927, but he's only played 2 games, and those 2 games were against the Senators, who are not good, and the Habs, who, while better than the Senators, are also not good. So I'm not ready to declare him as the savior of the team just yet. To put it nicely, the Kings' goaltending is really bad. To make it worse, the Kings are top 10 in fewest shots allowed per game. So their goaltending is the worst in the league, while their goalies are facing fewer shots on average than most teams. But despite that, they found themselves in a playoff spot for the majority of the season. How is that the case? Well, maybe it's their offense. Maybe they're just simply outscoring all their goalie problems. But that doesn't really seem to be the case. Now, the Kings are tied for the third most goals scored of any team this year, but they've also played the most games so far of any team this year. In terms of goals scored per game, the LA Kings are 10th in the league at 3.39, which is respectable. They're in the top third of the league, but they're also allowing the 7th most goals per game. For a team that's getting .881 goaltending, you would expect that for them to be in a playoff spot, they would be like top 3 in goal scoring. Now, when they do score a lot of goals, they tend to win. In the 10 games the Kings have scored 5 or more goals in, they have a record of 7-2-1, which leaves them with a record of 8-10-3 in games they don't score at least 5 goals in. And they're only winning games by an average margin of 1.7 goals. So half of the team's wins this season have come from when they've scored 5 or more goals, but they've only done so in a third of their games. But somehow they find themselves in a playoff spot, and have been in one for a majority of the season. And they're not just in a playoff spot, they're top 3 in the Pacific Division. There has to be some reason for this being the case. Well, maybe they have a really good record against teams in their division. Well, in the 8 games they have played against other Pacific Division teams, they have a record of 2-4-2. So that doesn't make sense either. And in the games they've played against the entire Western Conference, they have a record of 8-6-3, which in terms of points percentage is over 500, but it's still more losses than wins. Now, against Eastern Conference teams, the LA Kings have a record of 7-5-2, which in terms of points percentage is on par with the Avalanche and the Stars. And this might offer a bit of an answer as to why the Kings, despite horrendous goaltending, find themselves third in the Pacific Division. It might just be due to the simple fact that the Western Conference sucks. A majority of the teams in the Western Conference are pretty mediocre, especially compared to the East. The playoff race in the East is gonna be an absolute bloodbath, with so many good teams that at any point can get hot and threaten for a playoff spot. And then you look at the West, the Oilers and the Flames have underperformed, and somehow the Canucks are only 4 points out of a playoff spot. The competition in the West is not that great, and with a bunch of mediocre teams in the Western Conference, someone has to make the playoffs, and I guess currently that's the LA Kings. And the fact that they've played pretty well against Eastern Conference opponents who are objectively tougher, and I say pretty well compared to the rest of the teams in the West, definitely factors to them being in a playoff spot in the Western Conference. So is that just it? They play in what is objectively the weaker of the two conferences, and since someone has to make the playoffs, why not them? And I'd be pretty satisfied with that answer for the most part. But with 35 points, they'd be in the playoff race in the Eastern Conference as well. The team with the worst save percentage in the league, that can't consistently outscore the goalie problems and have a negative goal differential, would be in the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. I just don't get it. And to be fair, I haven't watched every single second of Kings hockey this season. So if you're a Kings fan watching this, please help me understand in the comments how they're doing this. And that's the video. If you enjoyed it, leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. We're over halfway to 100 subscribers, which is nuts, and I really appreciate all the support on the videos. But with that being said, thank you for watching.